From a trashed warplane found in the ice to unfortunate victims of a prehistoric sacrifice, here are 10 crazy things found frozen in ice. Warplane in Greenland. Under 300 feet of ice in Greenland, a World War II P-38 plane has been discovered. On July 15, 1942, there were 6 P-38 fighter aircraft and 2 B-17 bombers that encountered a blizzard and were forced to conduct an emergency landing in the middle of a glacier in Greenland. All the crew members ended up being rescued just over a week later, but the aircrafts were all left behind. Over the years, the shifting ice sheets buried the aircrafts, which came to be known as the Lost Squadron. But 50 years later, in 1992, one of the planes was finally extracted from the ice. It was even restored to perfect flying condition. According to Popular Mechanics, a new expedition has discovered a second aircraft from the Lost Squadron. They used ground-penetrating radar mounted on drones to search for the buried planes. Once they detected one of them, a team went down to check it out. The aircraft has since been identified as the P-38 Echo, and with support from the governments of the United States and the United Kingdom, along with Greenland, the extraction process began. The team is now using heat plates to tunnel down to the craft, where they will then send workers to disassemble the plane and bring it up piece by piece. Iron Age horse. In Norway, a melting glacier high up in the mountains has revealed the remains of a horse that dates back all the way to the Iron Age. This is a pretty incredible find, as it shows that people from the Iron Age were using horses to transport things high up in the mountains in areas where people were not previously thought to have been roaming around. It's believed that the horse discovered under the ice was being used at the time by hunters to carry reindeer carcasses off the mountains to be eaten. During the summer season, reindeer get bothered by horseflies and move up into the ice, and that must have made for an excellent hunting ground during the Iron Age. It makes sense that the hunters would have gone up there to search for potential food. Along with the actual horse remains, archaeologists also found horseshoes and horse manure in the ice. As the glaciers all over the world melt, more and more interesting discoveries that had been buried either in the Ice Age or near the end of the Ice Age are being uncovered. The horse in Norway is just one example of countless discoveries being thawed as our world warms. Several prehistoric horses have also been found in the ice. An extinct type of horse called the Lena horse was found with liquid inside of it. Scientists are now working to clone the horse and possibly bring it back to life. What do you think? Do you think this is a good idea? Let me know in the comments below, and while you're at it, be sure to subscribe if you are new here. We've got a lot of amazing videos coming up. Victims of sacrifice. Here we have a pretty disturbing discovery. Scientists first discovered the mummified remains of 3 children in 1999 entombed inside of a shrine near the summit of a volcano in Argentina, over 21,000 feet up. The children buried there included a 13-year-old girl and a younger boy, and a girl who were thought to be around 5 years old. Their remains date back to 500 years ago during the reign of the Inca Empire, who had dominated South America until the greedy Europeans arrived near the ending of the 15th century. The remains were found in exceptional condition because they had been preserved by the ice and the cold. What's really interesting is that an international team of researchers used forensics to try and discern a little more about the final moments of these children's lives. What they found was mass amounts of alcohol and coca leaves in their systems. Basically, these 3 children had been consuming alcohol and cocaine before they were brought up to the top of the mountain to die. According to the BBC, alcohol and cocaine was strictly reserved for the elite and for special rituals in the Incan civilization. Scientists believe the children were selected for sacrifice, and that was when the alcohol and coca consumption began. And this may have been for the best, since all 3 were locked in their tombs and left to die pretty nasty deaths. If I were being sacrificed, I probably would not mind being loaded up on booze and coca too. Medieval mummies. Let's check out some more frozen mummies. These medieval mummies come from a mysterious Arctic civilization recently discovered in Siberia. There are only 2 mummies in this situation, an adult and a baby, and they were both found in an archaeological complex that was first discovered in 1997. However, the mummies were not discovered until 2015. They were completely covered in copper, with the adult mummy being plated from head to toe and the child being covered in fragments of a copper kettle. During the Arctic expedition in 2015, scientists found at least 10 graves, with 5 of them that had not been looted at all. This is likely thanks to the icy conditions keeping the tombs very well hidden. Apparently, the whole region was once home to an ancient civilization that lived there sometime between the 8th and 13th centuries AD. The expedition leader claims that the remains found were in exceptionally good condition and needed to be removed with absolute care. Before the next expedition to this very cold place begins, the science team is going to check out the insides of the mummies, including their burial cocoons, and try to study their DNA to find out more about this extinct civilization in the Arctic and what they were all about. A new island. The Greenland ice sheet is enormous, and it has been melting at an alarming rate over the last few decades. This has contributed to global sea level rise and other environmental changes, but as the ice melts, more cool stuff is being uncovered. One of the coolest things to recently be revealed is an entire new island. The coast of Greenland is continuing to change regional maps, and the newest thing needing to be added to the map is a brand new island. And it's not the first. Two different glaciers have been slowly retreating from Greenland between 1999 and 2014, and this has added several new islands to the country. It started in 2012 with a narrow glacier connecting the unnamed island with the rest of the land, but now that ice is gone and the only thing left is a lonely island. Some of these islands actually act as anchors, keeping a specific glacier in place. So once the glacier melts off of the island, it's basically like it loses its roots and the rest of the glacier quickly vanishes. As more and more islands appear, the glaciers will melt even more quickly until Greenland is nothing but a bunch of bare islands and like 7 or 8 people. Anthrax release. A brutal heat wave in Siberia in 2017 resulted in an outbreak of deadly anthrax and a series of explosions. As the tundra thaws, things are getting out of control. This happened in northern Siberia, and a boy actually died from anthrax in the remote Yamal Peninsula when temperatures reached over 90 degrees Fahrenheit and melted the permafrost. What happened was that spores of highly infectious anthrax that had been frozen inside of infected reindeer rejuvenated themselves and infected local herds of reindeer, and the anthrax eventually was passed along to local people. As I already said, one boy died, but there were actually 20 others who were infected, treated, and ultimately survived. Up until this incident, anthrax had not been seen in the region for at least 75 years. It's all because of the freak heat wave and the ice thawing. As if an outbreak of anthrax isn't scary enough, there were also huge explosions in the same region. According to The Guardian, local reindeer herders saw flames shooting out of a massive crater that appeared out of nowhere in the ground. Experts believe that the melting permafrost thawed dead vegetation and erupted in a blowout of extremely flammable methane gas. In simple terms, vegetation that had been dead and frozen for thousands of years thawed and released a bubble of methane, which then caught on fire. And apparently over the last 3 years, the same region has been victim to 14 other massive craters thanks to the melting ice. And as the ice melts, more and more bubbles of methane break open and release their gases. The Frozen Lighthouse. The St. Joseph Lighthouse in Michigan is pretty incredible when it's frozen over with ice. Some pictures have been circling of the frozen lighthouse taken back in January. Apparently, this happens in the coldest part of winter. With strong gales and intense waves, the lighthouse eventually becomes encased completely in ice. This is not really a discovery, but it is pretty cool. Just look at the way the ice forms over the lighthouse. It looks like some kind of frozen castle from a fantasy world. The lighthouse is located on Lake Michigan near Chicago, and it stands 35 feet tall and was first built in 1884. In this area, the air temperature drops significantly to around -4 degrees Fahrenheit, and the frozen waves crash up to nearly 20 feet up on the structure. Making the lighthouse even cooler is the skinny footpath leading between the lake and the building. It also freezes over with ice, and in the winter is very slippery. This is one of the most spectacular things to check out on Lake Michigan during the winter. And while there are many photos of the front of the lighthouse, not many people venture around the back for fear of the tall waves and rioting winds. Mammoth brains. Just recently, an extremely well-preserved mammoth was discovered in the Siberian permafrost. Not only was the mammoth discovered with much of its hair not yet decayed, but it was also found with a mummified brain. This is one of the only examples ever of scientists discovering the brain of an animal frozen for nearly 40,000 years. The brain even still has its blood vessels. It was found on the Laptov Sea, and researchers believe the mammoth was between 6 and 9 years old when it died. After its discovery, the woolly mammoth was transported to an ice storage about 93 miles from the site, and it has since been put on display in several different locations. But don't worry, researchers have kept the actual brain. The investigators were able to study the cerebellum, which is a part located at the back of the brain. They were even able to see the white matter and the gray matter. This is the only woolly mammoth brain ever discovered, and according to Live Science, the researchers believe that woolly mammoths might have had complicated behaviors that are very similar to modern elephants. The researchers even found some traces of nervous tissue when examining the brain. At this point, it's almost like they found a living animal. Dive of Doom. This has got to be the most brazen dive you have ever seen. Kingfisher birds are pretty gorgeous, and they very often dive into ponds to snatch little creatures to eat, but this unfortunate pair of kingfishers plunged into the water at the wrong time. This happened in Germany, and it was a priest who stumbled upon the two birds petrified in the ice. This was in northern Bavaria, and it must have happened after temperatures plummeted across most of Europe. Foresters cut the blocks of ice out of the lake that contained the birds to preserve them, and the images are nothing short of shocking. Basically, kingfisher birds will dive through holes in frozen water to try and catch small fish. What probably happened is that both birds dove into the lake to catch some kind of fish. They couldn't find the hole to get back out, and in just a few moments the birds were frozen and dead. While super tragic, it is also quite remarkable. To give you an idea of just how cold the temperature was in Germany at the time, it was about -22 degrees Fahrenheit. That's cold enough to freeze you solid in no time at all. Interestingly enough, it was during the same cold snap that a fox was also found in Germany, completely frozen in a block of ice. During this time, the Mirror reported that at least 30 people died from the cold, and so far as we know, at least 3 very adorable animals were frozen in blocks of ice. Bleeding Glacier. Probably the most disturbing thing to find beneath the ice is blood. I'm talking about the Bleeding Glacier from Antarctica. The dry valleys in Antarctica, even though they are covered in ice, are also some of the driest and most arid places on Earth. However, underneath the dry surface, there are lakes and very salty rivers. When talking about the Bleeding Glacier, it really does look like a small section of the glacier is just pouring blood into the ice, but it's actually a rust-colored brine causing the color. It's due to bacteria living underneath the ice. The dramatic blood hue is because brine seeps out from the end of the glacier. The briny water actually goes at least 3 miles up the glacier, while there is more water stretching at least 7.5 miles inland that is twice as salty as seawater. This is all a little confusing, but the main point is that under the ice is groundwater that looks a lot like blood, and according to Live Science, the environment is actually similar to what we might find on Mars. Experts believe Mars also has lakes of briny groundwater under sheets of dried ice, and that the planet actually changed from an environment of liquid water to the dry, arid environment as seen in the dry valleys in Antarctica. What do you think is the craziest thing found in ice? Let me know in the comments. From a literal Cyclops to a bag of human hands, here are the most incredible things ever caught in the ocean. Albino Cyclops shark. In a world of photoshopped monsters, it's hard to believe that the albino Cyclops shark really exists. However, experts claim it is absolutely real. This bizarre creature has a single eyeball right in the middle of its forehead, making it look exactly like a swimming Cyclops. So far as the story goes, the Cyclops shark was actually sliced from the belly of a pregnant mother dusky shark, which had been caught by a commercial fisherman somewhere in the Gulf of California. According to a report from Fox News, shark researchers examined the creature and found that yes, its singular eye was indeed made of perfectly functional optical tissue. However, they had serious doubts about the mutated creature surviving outside of the womb. The experts say there are less than 50 examples of such an abnormality ever recorded. The actual name for the condition is called cyclopia, and it's a developmental anomaly in which only one eye develops rather than two. There are even human fetuses that are sometimes affected with this condition. In the case of a 1982 Cyclops baby in Israel, the girl was born 7 weeks early with no nose and a single eye right in the middle of her face. It's reported that the infant only lived for 30 minutes after being born. Cyclopia is a rare but almost always fatal condition. It's a truly devastating genetic mutation. If you ever encounter an animal with one single eye, you absolutely have to document it. But this is not about animals or people that lose an eye in an accident or due to violence. Have you ever heard of Cyclopia? What do you think about it? Do you think it is possible that someday scientists will be able to help save babies born with this tragic condition? Let me know your opinion in the comments below, and while you're doing that, don't forget to subscribe if you have not already. There are lots of more videos coming up, and also let us know what videos you'd like to see. The blue mahi-mahi. The blue mahi-mahi is a catch that only comes around once in a blue moon. This fish is nothing short of extraordinary. In Mexico, mahi-mahi are known as dorado, which translates to the golden one. These fish are extremely prized by professional anglers because of their quality flesh and spectacular golden colors. While thrashing on the end of the fishing line, a dorado will often sizzle in a variety of colors from a green, yellow to a vibrant gold. However, there is a special kind of fish even rarer than the golden dorado, and that's the blue dorado or blue mahi-mahi. A fisherman fishing off the coast of Baja California captured 154 dorado in just 4 days on a special excursion, and while most of them were the proper gold color, a few of these giant fish turned up completely blue. This is one of the rarest types of fish you can catch in the area. However, it might not actually be rare at all. Some experts claim that the dorado is able to change its flesh to be a different color. This means that they are sometimes caught looking silver, gold, or sky blue. After the mahi-mahi is dead and put inside the fish box, they typically turn the darker green or gold color. Animals that change colors are some of my favorites. It would be amazing to have that power, but instead we'll have to settle for our big human brains and no chameleon skin. The tiny marlin. Marlin are pretty impressive fish, specifically the Atlantic blue marlin. These are massive and aggressive fish that are extremely prized by fishermen for their strength and acrobatics. And of course they are pretty heavy, weighing in at around 1,500 pounds. This means most fishermen struggle for hours just to reel in a single blue marlin. However, Men's Journal has reported the smallest marlin ever captured. It was by a man named Richard Brackett, and the tiny little marlin is the smallest ever on record. It's only about the size of half your pinky finger, and even though it kind of looks like a small sailfish, the catch has been verified by biologists to be a legitimate blue marlin. Of course, it's not actually an adult marlin, it's only a baby, but the chances of catching one are still super small. And the craziest part of the story is that Brackett caught the fish in his hands and dropped it in a bucket to take a photo. The tiny little marlin had been swimming in the light behind the transom of his boat, and it was just as simple as cupping his hands and scooping the marlin into them. The fish was released afterwards and is hopefully living a long and peaceful life in the sea. But it's refreshing to hear a fisherman's tale about the smallest catch rather than the ridiculous tales of oversized fish. Giant moonfish. Here is one of the most disgusting fish ever captured from the ocean. It looks like something out of your nightmares. It's known as the moonfish, and it was caught by fishermen in the waters off South Kuril Island in Russia. As reported by the Siberian Times, the moonfish is one of the rarer catches in the area. However, locals were absolutely astounded by the grotesque size of this particular moonfish. It's the first known warm-blooded fish ever captured that has weighed over a ton. The boat that reeled the fish in was so surprised that it took them over a day to decide whether to take the catch back to shore or simply let it go back into the ocean. Sadly for the fish, it died while the fishermen were making their decision, so they brought it ashore and left it at the port. But this enormous fish began to rot, and so the local authorities decided they would give the giant fish carcass to the hungry local brown bears. The brown bears were extremely happy about this decision, as it is sometimes hard for them to find sufficient food. However, the scientists from Sakhalin History Museum also wanted to get a hold of such a rare creature and were disappointed it had been used to feed some local bears. There is apparently a deal now between the scientists and the fishermen to hand over any new specimens for research. Could you imagine it, just capturing a rare and valuable fish and letting it go to the animals? At least the bears were happy about it. The Cimera Lobster. There is almost no way this lobster could be real. It's such a rare creature that there is almost no chance of ever finding another one like it. This is the two-face of lobsters, half orange and half dark blue, but not its claws, only its body. It has perfect symmetry with half its shell, a hard blue color, and the other half a bright orange. It was caught off the coast of New Brunswick in Canada and is now more famous than most of us will ever be. Nobody even knew a lobster like this existed. It's an absolute anomaly. After the lobster was initially caught in Beaver Harbor, one of the crew members took the unique animal to the Huntsman Fundy Discovery Aquarium in St. Andrews to get more information on what exactly they had just pulled out of the water. But the staff at the aquarium were just as surprised as everybody else. One of the reasons this is so incredibly rare is that the shell of a lobster has its color determined much in the same way a human skin does. It all depends on how prominent certain color pigments are. In humans, we use melanin. But lobsters use a pigment known as astaxanthin. The explanation for this bizarre coloring must have something to do with a cellular split when the eggs were first fertilized, meaning that another lobster and this lobster somehow got their cells mixed up. In any case, the odds of finding another Cimera lobster with two different tones split perfectly down the middle is somewhere around 1 in 50 million. It's probably never going to happen again. An enormous manta ray. This is one of those photos you've probably seen circulating that doesn't even look a little real. Everything about the giant manta ray in this photo screams fake, but I promise you it's 100% legit. It's one of the largest manta rays ever caught and brought to land, and it happened in 1933 off the coast of New Jersey by a man named Captain A.L. Kahn. You might be wondering just exactly how big the manta ray is, especially since it's being held in the air by a crane. Let me tell you, this monster weighed over 5,000 pounds when it was first caught, and it wasn't even caught on purpose. The captain had been angling 7 miles, 12 kilometers from shore when the enormous manta got entangled in the anchor line. It nearly took out the man's boat. The Coast Guard had to be called. There were 22 rifle shots fired into the beast, and they never even got it onto the boat. They had to tow the manta ray back to the marina where they celebrated their bizarre catch. Giant manta rays are still prominent in the world today, though their numbers are definitely dwindling. They can be found in the warmer oceans of the Earth and are actually pretty mellow and peaceful creatures. They typically survive only by eating plankton. Just like most of the largest animals on the planet, they are almost completely vegetarian. Looks like the giant manta ray is just another example of how important it is to eat your vegetables to grow big and strong. 54 human hands. This one is pretty creepy, warning for those of you with sensitive stomachs. Fish aren't the only bizarre and jaw-dropping things caught in the ocean, not by a long shot. One of the most incredible things ever caught was a bag of severed human hands, and no, it was not caught in the ocean, but it was caught in a Russian river. It's a pretty grisly sight to behold. After the bag was found, the authorities emptied the contents into the snow to document them, but they don't really look like hands in the photos. They look more like old crusty work gloves, but unfortunately they are indeed human hands, 54 of them to be exact. This happened in the city of Khabarovsk, far in the east of Siberia, but before you start blaming a serial murderer for all these hands, it's a little more complicated than that. You see, local authorities claim that the hands were taken from unidentified bodies and stored at a nearby forensic laboratory. The hands were supposedly taken to preserve their fingerprints in case they needed them for proof in a later investigation. But how did the bag of hands end up in the river? Well, it looks like it was dumped on a small island in the middle of the river. It's no wonder people were extremely suspicious. You would think there are rules and regulations about dumping large garbage bags full of human hands in a river, but maybe not. It is Russia after all. Things get a little bit weird out in the Siberian Far East. Two-headed turtle. Turtles are awfully cute all on their own, but what about the mutant two-headed turtle that was found on Hilton Head Island in South Carolina? Yes, it's as adorable as you would expect. The manager of the Sea Turtle Patrol Hilton Head Island said it's a rare condition but nothing to be concerned about. This is after people began to spout nonsense online talking about radiation in the water or some other pollutants. But that's not the case. The two-headed turtle, which was first discovered in 2019, is just something that happens sometimes in nature. There are not many examples of a creature being born with two heads, but it does sometimes happen. It happens with humans too. The mutant was found after all the other turtle eggs hatched. The poor little two-headed freak was stuck inside of its egg and would not have been able to get out on its own. Luckily, volunteers on the site got it out and into the water, but it wasn't going to survive. It appeared that each flipper was controlled by a different head, and so it couldn't swim very well. A small bump in the middle of the turtle shell suggested that each head had its own spine. This would mean that all the systems were going to be separately controlled by the different heads. It had absolutely no chance for survival in the wild. Fortunately for this cute little creature, it has a chance at survival if humans decide to care for it and give it a chance at a life it would never have had in nature. Human skull. Here we have a pretty interesting catch from a few years ago. A fishing trawler from Kilmore, Ireland happened to scoop up a rather gross extra in their nets, a human skull. They had been fishing 35 miles, 55 kilometers off the coast in an area known as the West Celtic Deeps when they pulled a human skull out of the ocean inside their fishing net. Obviously alarmed, the fishermen took the human skull to the first place they thought, the local regional hospital. It was then examined by a pathologist, in which the preliminary examinations indicated that the skull had likely been at sea for between 1 and 2 years. However, the real mystery is the location where the skull was found. It was recovered extremely close to the wreckage of a boat that went down during World War II. The thing that would make the most sense is that the skull belonged to a dead soldier from the shipwreck, but if the skull had only been underwater for 1 or 2 years, how could that be possible? Whose skull is this? The whole thing is mysterious and a little bit terrifying. It's the definition of a cold case. What's the truth? We may never know. A murder mystery. No one would believe it, but this true story is the only time in recorded history that a tiger shark solved a murder mystery. The year was 1935. The owner of the Coogee Aquarium and swimming baths had been struggling with business when his son caught a 10-foot tiger shark a few miles off the shore in the ocean. Trying to be clever, the owner of the aquarium decided to transport the shark into the bath and then charge people to look at the incredible creature. It was a very smart business scheme. The plan worked well until one day the shark regurgitated a full human arm. The owner of the aquarium called the police. The police came and fished the arm out of the water, and after a bit of investigating, the police figured out that the arm had been cut and not bitten. Thanks to a tattoo on the arm, the authorities were able to identify the rest of the man. It turned out he was missing and believed to be murdered. With a bit of good police work, the cops were eventually able to arrest a man in connection to the murder, and it was all thanks to the tiger shark. I've heard of bloodhounds finding missing people, but never a tiger shark. How unbelievable is that? What do you think of these incredible catches? From the jungles of South America to the forests of Southeast Asia, here are 10 of the biggest snakes that ever lived, including a prehistoric monster of outrageous proportions. Burmese Python. There are a lot of big snakes in this world of ours, and one of the largest snakes ever was a Burmese python captured in Florida back in 2012. Researchers with the United States Geological Survey in the state of Florida captured a Burmese python in the Everglades National Park that was approximately 17 feet and 7 inches long. That's 5.4 meters. It weighed 164.5 pounds and was an absolute monster. This obviously is not the biggest snake in existence, but at the time it was the largest ever recorded for that state. What makes this particular find really cool is that scientists later found 87 eggs inside of the snake. This happened after the animal was brought to the Florida Museum of Natural History for some special examinations as part of a research project to try and figure out how to manage the invasive Burmese python problem. As you may know, Burmese pythons are not native to Florida, but they have been wreaking havoc on the ecosystem, eating a lot of native birds and preying on large animals like bobcats, alligators, and deer. Reticulated Python. Back in 2016, one of the world's largest snakes was discovered at a Malaysian construction site. This enormous reticulated python measured a whopping 26.2 feet, 8 meters in length. That makes it larger than 5 grand pianos and almost as long as a giraffe standing on the head of another giraffe. Just think about how long that is for a second. It is absolutely huge. This snake was also longer than Medusa, the longest captive snake on record according to Guinness World Records. However, the snake found in Malaysia would not be breaking any records, as it actually died 3 days after it was discovered while in the middle of laying an egg. And so the reticulated python named Medusa, who makes her home in Kansas City, is still the record holder. According to Live Science, it actually took emergency services about 30 minutes just to wrangle the enormous reticulated python in Malaysia. And while locals claimed that the snake weighed at least 550 pounds, 250 kilograms, that's probably a little far-fetched. An anaconda might weigh upwards of 500 pounds, but not a reticulated python. These snakes are extremely long, but they aren't actually that heavy. Have you ever been bitten by a snake? How did it happen? Did you have to go to the hospital? Let me know what happened in the comments below. Also be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the subscribe button now so you can stay up to date with all the latest videos. African rock python. Pythons are the largest snakes in the world, and while the reticulated python and the Burmese python are the most famous, there is another type of python that often flies under the radar. This snake is known as the African rock python, and it's the only one of its kind that lives in Africa. Most of the pythons live in different places in Asia, specifically in Southeast Asia. The African rock python lives in grasslands and savannas, and sometimes along the edges of the forests in sub-Saharan Africa. The snake is not venomous, and it kills its prey just like other pythons by suffocating its victims between its muscly coils. Like other pythons, this one can grow to be between 20 and 30 feet, 6 to 9 meters, but they don't weigh that much. According to the Oregon Zoo, they only weigh up to 250 pounds. These aren't the biggest pythons by a mile, but they are unique to Africa, and that makes them pretty cool. These pythons have been known to prey on warthogs, monkeys, crocodiles, and even dogs that get too close. Green Anaconda. The green anaconda is the biggest of all the snakes. When it comes down to it, the green anaconda is really an animal out of this world, and you have to see it to truly understand how outrageously huge it is. Anacondas are absolute monsters. Amazon folklore even places these snakes anywhere between 60 and 100 feet, 18 to 30 meters. Obviously, no green anaconda has ever been found that is that large. The biggest anaconda ever reliably documented was only 27.2 feet, 8.6 meters long, according to How Stuff Works. But the legends are still pretty cool. Unlike pythons, anacondas get heavy. These things can weigh upwards of 440 pounds, 200 kilograms. Because the green anaconda is so monstrously heavy, they tend to live in the water. They specifically love the rivers in the Amazon jungle, and they make their homes in the various swamplands of Amazonia. Living in the water allows them to conceal their ridiculously long coils, and it's easier for them to slither through the water than trying to navigate their huge bodies across the forest floor. What's really cool is that the anaconda has its eyeballs sitting on top of its head along with its nostrils, and this allows it to swim through the water while keeping an eye on everything going on around it. These animals don't have any natural predators, so they just kind of float through life without a care. Indian python. There seems to be a python for almost every area east of Europe. The Indian python is one of the largest snakes in the world, only smaller than the anaconda and the reticulated python. These serpents live in India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Nepal, and they tend to grow to be a little over 20 feet, 6 meters, weighing somewhere around 150 pounds. Unlike the great anaconda that slithers through rivers, according to the Maryland Zoo, the Indian python is usually found dangling from tree branches where it can easily snatch a meal as it runs by below. These animals even like to claim a favorite roosting site where they spend most of their time lounging around and waiting to feast. Indian pythons hunt mostly at night, and they are well adapted to it because of the heat-sensing pits inside of their jaws. These special organs are incredibly sensitive to any change in temperature, and so whenever a warm-blooded animal starts to come near, the snake can easily prepare itself to strike. Another interesting fact is that when you see a snake like this flicking its tongue, it's not trying to tease you, it's actually gathering chemical samples from the atmosphere that are then analyzed by a unique organ situated inside the roof of the snake's mouth. How's that for a weather system? It's the snake equivalent of licking your thumb and putting it in the wind. Titanoboa. The Titanoboa was the largest snake ever to roam the planet, and it makes the green anaconda look like a baby shrimp. To put it lightly, the Titanoboa was likely somewhere between 40 feet and 50 feet long, 12 to 15 meters. It's impossible to know the exact measurements, but after the recovery of this snake's fossils in Colombia just a few years ago, scientists have a pretty solid idea of how truly titanic this snake once was. The Titanoboa would have lived around 60 million years ago, back when much of South America was a swampy jungle with absolutely no humans in it. It was hotter back then than it is now today, and it was wetter too. And in this wet and humid jungle, there lived one king at the top of the food chain, the Titanoboa. It weighed over a ton, and it likely looked very similar to a modern boa constrictor. However, its actions and behavior would have been much like that of the current anaconda. It would have lived in rivers and other watery areas, and it would have eaten pretty much anything it wanted. One of its favorite meals was probably an ancient turtle that had a shell twice the size of a manhole cover. And even though this snake is most certainly dead and gone, it's still amazing to imagine what it would be like coming face to face with a serpent taller than an average apartment building. King Cobra. The king cobra is the meanest snake in the world. It's a savage serpent with a very venomous bite, and it does not take any nonsense from anyone. Though definitely not the biggest or heaviest, the king cobra is indeed the longest species of venomous snake on the planet. These deadly creatures are native to India and Southeast Asia, with the average snake measuring around 12 feet, 3.6 meters in length. According to Guinness World Records, the longest specimen on record was captured in 1937 in Malaysia, then put on display at the London Zoo. It measured 18 feet and 8 inches, 6 meters. That's like the size of a small anaconda. This record-breaking snake actually had to be destroyed when World War II broke out, along with the other venomous snakes at the zoo. While this may seem cruel, it was done in order to protect the general public in case the zoo was bombed and all the venomous snakes got loose. Imagine a nearly 20-foot king cobra slithering through your bomb shelter and biting you in the face. Boa Constrictor. The boa constrictor is the cousin of the anaconda. Both these snakes are amazing swimmers, but the boa constrictor is significantly smaller than its famous relative. The poor little boa constrictor can only grow to be around 13 feet, 4 meters long, and it typically does not weigh more than 100 pounds, 40 kilograms. And maybe it's this weight differential that gives the two snakes such contrasting behavioral patterns. Rather than slithering through the water like the anaconda, the boa constrictor likes to live in hollow logs, abandoned mammal burrows underground, or somewhere else nice and cozy on dry land. These snakes are still good swimmers, but they prefer to hang out on the shore eating birds, monkeys, and wild pigs. Their jaws can stretch wide enough to swallow just about any prey whole. What's really cool about the boa constrictor is that it has some of the most distinctive markings out of any reptile. It all depends on what habitat the boa constrictor is trying to blend into. Depending on where it is, the snake can either be tan, red, green, or yellow, and its pattern will also be different, ranging from something simple like ovals or diamonds to jagged lines. Olive python. Our final python on the list for today is the olive python from Australia. Like I said earlier, it's as if every place in the world has its own special python. This particular bad boy is able to eat everything from kangaroos to possums, porcupines, and even wild crocodiles. Even though these aren't nearly as big as reticulated pythons or Burmese pythons, they are still the biggest snakes in Australia at roughly 13 feet, 4 meters in length. And in a most recent show of strength, photos were uploaded by GG Wildlife Rescue Incorporated after an olive python was caught gobbling down a full crocodile like a fat guy with a donut. It's a little disturbing to see the snake's body bloated and about a foot of the alligator's tail sticking out from its mouth, but that's just how these snakes roll. Clearly, they are at the top of the food chain. However, after eating such a large meal, it usually takes a few months for it to be digested. This greedy snake will be sitting there with the crocodile in its stomach for quite some time before it can get back to whatever it was doing before. Black mamba. Last on the list is the black mamba. It's a far cry from the pythons and constrictors of the world, but it's still a huge snake. Not only that, but it's a snake with a reputation. It's one of the deadliest snakes in the entire world, and it's also the fastest land snake according to Live Science. It's the longest venomous snake in Africa, and the danger of this beast has been the subject of countless African myths. Throughout the years, the black mamba has been blamed for thousands of human deaths, though the real number of the snake's victims are extremely difficult to come by. On average, a black mamba will grow to be around 14 feet, 4 meters long, though they are more likely going to be only 8 feet, 2.5 meters. 14 is definitely on the larger side. You can easily tell the black mamba from its coffin-shaped head, its bad attitude, and its inky black eyes. These snakes live in the savanna of East Africa and South Africa. They like rocky hills and open woodlands, and according to the University of Michigan Museum of Zoology, they really enjoy sleeping in the hollows of trees, so think twice before sticking your head where it doesn't belong on your next trip to Africa. From one of the best preserved prehistoric sites in the world, totally shrouded in mystery, to a bizarre Mayan Batman statue, here are 10 ancient discoveries scientists still can't explain. Maltas Hypogeum. There are sites all over the world that still baffle scientists today. One of the most confusing and unexplainable prehistoric sites is the Hypogeum in Malta. It's one of the best preserved prehistoric discoveries ever. It's a 6,000-year-old underground burial chamber located on the small Mediterranean island of Malta, and it's actually one of Europe's only Neolithic necropolises. The archaeological evidence suggests that somewhere around 4000 BC, the residents of Malta began to build in such a way that they were ritualizing life and death. The Hal Saflieni Hypogeum is one of the best examples of this type of building. Its underground corridors are carved into the soft limestone about 3 miles, 5 kilometers from the capital city of Valletta. There were likely more impressive buildings above ground, but they have mostly been destroyed by the industrialization that started in the early 1800s. The Hypogeum stopped being used in around 2500 BC and was not discovered again until 1902. But the weirdest discovery that ever happened here has to be the abnormal skulls. Researchers found elongated skulls with cranial knitting, and all kinds of other strange bones inside the depths of the necropolis. Even until today, the skulls have largely been shrouded in mystery. Some people over the years have claimed the skulls are from serpent priests or aliens, but there is no proof of that. But the issue with these elongated skulls is that research has shown it to be natural, not from boarding or bandaging at birth. One of the favored explanations is that the skulls are actually from a different species of modern man, one lost to time. How strange is that? Pumapuchu. In the jungles of Bolivia is the remains of a holy site called Pumapuchu, and it could be even more mysterious than the pyramids. Pumapuchu translates to Door of the Puma, and so far as archaeologists understand, this was a thriving ancient town somewhere around 500 CE. Pumapuchu is located about 45 miles from La Paz at an altitude of roughly 12,000 feet. Hundreds and hundreds of years ago, this was the location in which the Inca believed the world was first created. What's really amazing about this place is how well the buildings are made. It's in a very isolated part of the jungle, and yet the craftsmanship of all their buildings is extremely advanced. The big stone blocks have been cut with extreme precision, with smooth right angles and with joints that fit together with machine accuracy. Plus, the megaliths found here are some of the biggest on the planet, with some of them weighing over a few tons. Most of the buildings are scattered and broken after so many years, but many of the megaliths still stand. One of the biggest mysteries is what could have destroyed such big and heavy buildings. It almost looks like a giant walked through and kicked them down. Basically, whoever created the site of Pumapuchu did so with arguably more precision and more knowledge of building concepts than even the ancient Egyptians. And to this day, nobody is entirely sure how such stonework was accomplished. Plain of Jars. The Plain of Jars is another place that scientists simply can't quite wrap their heads around. It's an ancient archaeological site located in the center of Laos, a landlocked country between Southeast Asia and China, and it's full of thousands of stone vessels. There are literally thousands of these strange stone jars scattered all across the plains. Archaeologists have also found many of the jars in forests and mountains in different regions of Laos. However, scientists have been trying to figure out why the stone jars were littered across so many remote places for years, and they still don't have a logical answer. Just recently, archaeologists unearthed another ancient burial site located at the Plain of Jars that they estimated to be 2,500 years old. And using new technology, scientists are combining footage from aerial drones with virtual reality so they can look at the site from new angles. According to Live Science, another reason the jars have not been studied so much is because the area was bombed extensively by the Americans during the Vietnam War, just like neighboring Cambodia, and many of the bombs that fell are still stuck somewhere in the ground and undetonated. That makes it very dangerous to be walking around. We know the jars are for burial, but the unanswered question is why they are spread around in such a confusing way. It's like the world's sloppiest graveyard. What do you think they mean? Where do you think they come from, and why were they left scattered? Could it be some type of strange connect the dots puzzle or physical treasure map? Let me know your best guesses in the comments below, then hit subscribe when you're done. You won't want to miss the next awesome videos in store, but the only way to make sure you see all of them is to subscribe. Sajama Lines. Everyone is relatively familiar with the mysterious Nazca lines in Peru, but have you heard of the Sajama lines in Bolivia? These lines are just as mysterious, though I will be the first to admit they are significantly less symbolic. Scattered across the western region of Bolivia are thousands of perfectly straight lines crisscrossing each other for absolutely no reason. They stretch on and on for miles and lead to nowhere. From satellite images, these definitely look like back roads, but they aren't. These lines are actually etched into the sand of the desert, and researchers believe the lines are geoglyphs left behind by the indigenous people in the region around 3,000 years ago. They are very close to the Nevado Sajama volcano, which happens to be the highest point in the entire country. But unlike the Nazca lines, these don't really show any interesting imagery like animals or people. Out of the thousands of lines, each one is somewhere between 3 and 10 feet, 1 to 3 meters in width. but every single line is perfectly straight despite that rugged terrain of the land. Most researchers believe this would have been quite a feat for indigenous people who had no modern technology. If you were to add up all the lines in the area, you would get 10,000 miles, 16,000 kilometers of road. Some even believe this is the largest work of art ever made. The indigenous people would have had to scrape away the top surface of the rock to reveal the lighter surface beneath, but nobody knows why. Committing so much effort to the endeavor seems absolutely illogical and pointless. The only theory that makes a little bit of sense is the one that claims that the footpaths led to shrines and sacred sites, but nobody can confirm this. To this day, the lines remain a mystery. The Venus Figurines. The Venus figurines are thought to be some of the earliest examples of figurative art on the entire planet. The Venus figurines are tiny little statuettes of women with huge hips and other generous proportions, and they date as far back as around 40,000 BC. That makes these female statuettes prehistoric, and despite this, they are shrouded in absolute mystery. Their interpretation has changed throughout the years depending on current culture. Archaeologists have interpreted them as portrayals of goddesses, as fertility talismans, or even as nourishment charms. And while some researchers have focused on the larger figurines that depict quite shapely people, there are indeed figurines that are unusually slender. They seem to depict every different form of body, which is quite bizarre considering they would have been made basically by prehistoric cave people. Throughout the years, over 200 figurines have been found across Europe and Asia, all the way from France to Siberia. These were carved in a time before humans even had written language, and because of that, there is no definitive proof for what the figurines represent. And to be quite honest, most of the researchers trying to figure it out are just grasping at straws. For all we know, they were literally just toys whittled by children who were bored. The Oracle of Delphi. The Oracle of Delphi was basically just a witch doctor. Just like the shamans in the Amazon and other magical members of society thousands of years ago who claimed to see the future, the Oracle of Delphi was just a witch doctor who hallucinated a lot. She is definitely the most famous oracle in Greek history and is still relevant in today's popular culture. And while there isn't really a mystery surrounding how exactly the oracle predicted the future or advised kings, as we know she basically saw imaginary sights and then made up a bunch of predictions, some new scientific finds are uncovering just how exactly the oracle got her magical visions up there on the hill in her temple. According to Live Science, new research from an Italian study is saying that the Oracle of Delphi might have not even ingested anything to hallucinate. The temple room where she channeled the wisdom of the gods may have actually been deficient in oxygen, with weak air ventilation and strong methane gases being released from the soil. It could have made her hallucinate. The legends say that the oracle entered a trance by inhaling fumes that came from deep fissures underneath the temple, and this could actually be what was going on. Previous to this study, there was quite a bit of mystery surrounding the whole oracle thing, with a lot of unfounded assumptions going around. But now it's looking like it actually does make sense. Poisonous gas was leaking out of the floor, and it was giving the oracle visions of the future. Either that or the gods really were speaking through her. Stone Age tools. A new discovery out of India is suggesting that humans may have been using tools a lot earlier than previously thought. It's originally believed that humans dispersed out of Africa and settled in India around 125,000 years ago, or even as late as 70,000 years ago. It would have been around this time when we were using stone tools throughout Europe and Africa, as well as the few parts of Asia that were inhabited. However, a new discovery in India has revealed 7,000 tools from the Stone Age that date back to around 385,000 years ago. These findings were published in the journal Nature in 2018, and they basically flipped the script on what we know about human dispersal from Africa and when it happened. There are even some very old artifacts from the site, which is located near the city of Chennai in southern India, that date back to around 1.5 million years ago. However, the big issue with this find, and the thing that is really confusing scientists, is that there were no fossils found anywhere near the tools. There is a huge treasure trove of ancient stone tools that date back hundreds of thousands of years and not a single skeleton. And so researchers have no way of telling who exactly left these tools and how old the people were. It's a total mystery, but it's also suggesting that we may have been spreading around the earth and using tools much earlier than previously imagined. Stonehenge. Stonehenge is one of the most confusing and mysterious sites in all of the United Kingdom. Of course, that's only until you actually go there and see it and you see the cars zipping by on the freeway about 30 feet from the actual stones. It really ruins the effect and the mystery. However, scientists have been stumped for years and years over who brought the stones, where they brought the stones from, and what exactly was going on in this site in ancient times. There have been lots of theories, but evidence and truth has been in short supply. Up until recently, archaeologists only knew the type of rock the stones were built out of, and they knew that the stones were dragged from an area about 25 miles, 40 kilometers north of Stonehenge, somewhere around 2500 BC. Other than that, there was not much that anyone knew. However, according to the University of Brighton, the stones have been traced back to a very specific 2-square-mile range of hills. Researchers found a small area where they believe the giant rocks were being used to construct prehistoric tombs over 1,000 years before Stonehenge was built. But that still doesn't answer the who, what, where, and why. There is yet more we don't know and may not ever know. Mayan Batman. It's nice to think that Batman was actually created by the Mayans thousands of years ago. However, that is completely unlikely and absolutely ridiculous. You may have seen the images of the ancient Mayan sculpture of Batman floating around the internet, but let me assure you, it's absolutely not ancient. It was crafted in 2014 by an artist as part of an exhibition at the Mexican Museum of Design. The sculpture was meant to explore the iconic character of Batman through the eyes of Mexican creativity. But of course, people got a hold of the photo and started spamming it across the internet, claiming it to be thousands of years old. It absolutely is not. The similarities here, and perhaps what makes it a little believable, is that there is indeed a bat god found in Mayan mythology named Camazotz, but that definitely was not the inspiration for Batman, and this sculpture is definitely not 2,500 years old. Although I'll be the first to admit how cool that really would be. Alexander the Great's tomb. People have been trying to locate the tomb of Alexander the Great ever since his death. It is one of the greatest mysteries that is still going on today. It's been a very long time since Alexander the Great conquered much of the known world, and not a single person has been able to locate his tomb. This will definitely be the largest archaeological discovery of the century when and if it ever happens. There are lots of clues, lots of theories, but everything has only ever led to disappointment. Let's go back to Alexander's death for a minute. It's known that he died in Babylon in 323 BC, but his cause of death is disputed. It could have been typhoid, malaria, alcohol poisoning, an assassination, or an autoimmune disorder. In any case, he was only 32 when he died. It's believed that his advisors first buried him in Memphis, but then changed their minds and took him to Alexandria to be buried there. It's believed that in Alexandria, his tomb became a place of worship, but when the Roman Emperor Theodosius banned pagan worship in 392 AD, Alexander's body went missing from his tomb. It's believed that another tomb was built, but where? Some claim it to be in the Siwa Oasis, while others claim it's actually in Venice. The truth is that nobody knows what happened to the most legendary king of all time, or where his current resting place is. From secret underground bunkers to horrifying archaeological discoveries, plus new findings from Mars, here are 10 incredible recent discoveries that just happened. German bunker. There are always new discoveries made in the world of Nazi Germany. One of the most recent discoveries was made by researchers in Normandy who discovered a huge complex of Nazi bunkers that had not been seen by anyone in around 75 years. Researchers had to dig underneath the ground just to find the doors that led inside of the bunkers. Everything inside was completely frozen in time. The complex consists of 2 massive bunkers, each one with 3 or 4 large rooms. This new discovery is part of the complex known as the Mahi Battery, which is about 2 miles from Omaha Beach. Back when it was operational, the complex had a total of 14 massive guns, including 150mm howitzers. What's really interesting about these bunkers is that researchers discovered evidence that they had been burned from the inside. They reckon it was either from a firefight to capture the site or the Nazis burned it themselves afterwards. This place is dark and creepy. It was also one of the bunkers used to defend the beaches during D-Day. How it got lost in time is a bit of a mystery, but nonetheless, it was full of amazing relics like gas masks, ammunition, and even Nazi helmets. Mission to Venus. This next one is both news and a discovery. After some recent scientific findings revealed the possibility of life on the planet Venus, NASA is now considering a mission to go there. They are apparently considering at least 2 planetary science missions to Venus by next April. The missions won't be underway by next April, but they would be approved, which is definitely a good first step. It all happened just recently in 2020 when an international research team discovered potential evidence of microbes living inside the acidic clouds of Venus. This newest discovery is providing extremely powerful evidence that there is indeed life beyond Earth, even if it is only microbial. And in light of this new discovery, NASA understands the importance of sending a mission to Venus to see exactly what is going on. Even though we have been mostly prioritizing Mars, like the next generation rover that launched last July to find potential traces of life on the red planet, NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine has said that it is now time to prioritize Venus. If there is indeed microbial life living on the planet, there is pretty much no way to know for sure unless we land there. Mars is obviously closer and easier to reach, but we have been there several times without finding any real life. Venus could expose all kinds of cosmic truths, and this is an opportunity that we definitely cannot pass up. Lakes on Mars. Let's stick with the stars for just another minute and check out the newest discovery from Mars. Speaking of life on other planets, planetary scientists have just discovered a total of 4 lakes hidden under the surface of the red planet. The discovery was published in Nature Astronomy, and it was made by using radar data from the European Space Agency's spacecraft Mars Express, which is currently orbiting the planet. Basically, the discovery of 4 subsurface lakes could mean that there is a habitat for life under the planet that we never knew about before. According to a planetary scientist from the University of Rome, it's a very complex system that they found. It may even be similar to the underground lakes found in Antarctica. The underground lakes on Mars cover a space of about 29,000 square miles, which is an area roughly 1/5 the size of Germany. The biggest lake measures roughly 19 miles across. As you might already know, because of the lack of atmosphere on Mars, liquid water is impossible on the surface. Scientists have speculated for a long time that there could be water trapped under the surface, since they also believe that the planet once had oceans billions of years ago. And now they have been proved right. There are definitely lake reservoirs under the surface of the planet, but the big question is what kind of life is living inside of them. On Earth, we have subglacial lakes in Antarctica with very curious life forms living in seemingly impossible conditions, so maybe Mars does too. Humans still evolving. We typically believe that evolution takes millions and millions of years to produce results, but this simply is not true. Evolution is an ongoing process, and recent research has proved that human beings are still evolving as we speak. To understand this entirely, we should start from the beginning. First of all, the early hominins of millions of years ago look almost nothing like us. Keep in mind that around 3 million years ago, we were a weird mix between apes and humans. But evolution goes further than that. Even the Homo sapiens who lived 10,000 years ago looked very different from what we look like today. And don't forget about how since humans spread out of Africa, we have gradually evolved to have different skin colors and other subtle genetic differences. One might say that the people of the Amazon jungle look nothing like the people of Scandinavia, and this all has to do with progressive evolution just over a short period of time. In one of the most recent studies, scientists discovered that human bones are getting weaker and less dense. They believe that Homo sapiens began to weaken somewhere around 12,000 years ago, right around the time that we began to farm. Once humans stopped being nomadic and settled down, our diets changed, our physical activities changed, and our skeletons became lighter and more fragile. According to a researcher at the University of Cambridge, human beings actually have the potential to be as strong as an orangutan. But because we have moved away from being hunters and become sedentary, our bodies are actually getting weaker. After another 1,000 years of sitting in our cars and watching TV, we could look a lot like human octopuses with no bones. Archaeology horror. Here we have a horrifying discovery out of Britain. It all started back in the 60s when a human skull was discovered near Basingstoke during excavations prior to the development of a housing unit. The workers were startled to discover human bones, and the remains were quickly placed in a museum, and the skull was left to collect dust. It wasn't until just recently that scientists went back to analyze the skull that was originally found in the 60s. A researcher at the Institute of Archaeology at the University College London was shocked by the condition of the skull. Researchers are now saying that this skull might have belonged to the earliest person on record in Anglo-Saxon England to have received the inhuman and despicable punishment of facial disfiguration for a crime that we will likely never know. The thing is, when researchers went back to analyze the skull, they found that it belonged to a female teenager and that her nose and lips had been cut off before death. Keep in mind this was over 1,000 years ago, but still that's a pretty heinous way to go. Researchers are speculating that the severity of the girl's injuries might have been punishment for something like sexual deviancy, or even just for the suspicion of some type of deviant behavior. Using radiocarbon dating, researchers found the teenage girl lived sometime between 776 and 899 AD. They also discovered a shallow cut across the teenager's forehead, which could suggest she had been scalped before death. Dog brains. Moving away from terrifying archaeological discoveries, let's take a look at two recent discoveries that have totally turned the tables on how scientists understand dogs and their brains. A new study published in August 2020 has shown that dogs actually understand verbal communication in the exact same way that humans do. What this means is that dogs are able to understand and differentiate tone and meaning just in the way that we can. The next time you're talking to your dog, keep in mind that it can probably understand more than you think. A second study has revealed that puppies age much quicker than older dogs. This one is a bit complicated. Dogs live on average about 12 years, and by contrast, human life expectancy is at least 5 times longer. This is why people have been saying for a long time that a dog year is equivalent to 7 human years, but this new study says that the rule is wrong. Genetic evidence is now suggesting that puppies age way quicker than older dogs. The co-author of the study has claimed that a 1-year-old dog is equivalent to something like a 30-year-old human. But then as time passes, dogs begin to age slower. Even though by the time a dog is 12 years old, it's actually 70 in human years, this does not mean it aged evenly. Dogs do almost all their aging when they're young, then spend their senior years creeping along at an even pace. Ancient workshop. In 2020, archaeologists may have uncovered evidence of the very first furnace ever to be used on Earth. This happened when an archaeological excavation uncovered what appeared to be a workshop once used for smelting copper ore. According to researchers from the Tel Aviv University, it is highly likely that this workshop was the first instance of man figuring out how to manufacture goods using a furnace. This is incredible considering the workshop is 6,500 years old, and it may have been used for domestic production just like a modern factory. The excavation uncovered a small installation crafted from tin that would have been used to smelt copper ore. But here is where the story gets really cool. It looks like the copper smelted at this workshop was actually mined in Jordan, over 60 miles away. Researchers are thinking that rather than smelt the ore at the area where it was mined, the material was transported an extremely far distance to keep the new technology a secret. Now, this was back in the Copper Age, and this technology would have been the equivalent to the discovery of the internet. Nobody would have known about it other than a few elite members of society, as the method behind smelting is actually quite complicated. The discovery of this workshop is now suggesting that the entire science of metallurgy was actually developed first in Israel. It's like finding the first ever clay pot or the first stone tool. It's really quite an amazing discovery. Mysterious carvings. For centuries, villagers living in the dusty hills of China's lowest plateau believed that the rock walls near their homes were actually part of the Great Wall of China. It does make sense considering that the dry region has been at the frontier of Chinese rule for over 2,000 years, but recently, a team of Chinese archaeologists investigated this strange rock wall and they began to unearth some very bizarre findings. To date, the excavation has now revealed more than 6 miles of protective walls which surround an enormous 230-foot tall pyramid with an inner sanctum covered in painted murals and filled with jade artifacts, and also macabre evidence of human sacrifice. Right before the excavation was suspended because of the coronavirus, archaeologists uncovered 70 relief sculptures in stone at this new archaeological site, including images of serpents, monsters, and inhuman beasts. Carbon dating revealed that parts of the site date back to around 4,300 years, which is over 2,000 years before the Great Wall was built, and 500 years before the Chinese civilization even took root. This would mean that a remote community lived in this place from around 2300 BC to around 1800 BC, then disappeared entirely. This huge city is not mentioned in any ancient text, and nobody has even thought anything of it for thousands of years because the villagers just didn't care, or people just thought it was part of the Great Wall. It's now being thought of as the largest Neolithic settlement in China. Canada-Australia connection. It's true that Canada and Australia were both British colonies at one point, but new fossil discoveries show an even older connection between the two countries. The discovery of a tiny insect fossil in Canada, estimated to be around 50 million years old, has raised some serious questions about what the Earth looked like all those years ago. The thing is, this tiny insect fossil found in Canada has a relative, and that relative lives exclusively in Australia. That means that 50 million years ago, the insect lived in Canada and somehow made its way to what is now Australia and continued to thrive on that continent. If you've ever looked at the Earth, you will notice that these two places are very far apart. This discovery is actually baffling scientists. Australia and Canada could not possibly have been touching even 50 million years ago. At that time, Australia would have been closer to Antarctica and much farther from Asia. That means there would have been a huge ocean barrier with almost no way for life to disperse between Canada and the land down under. But this is not a freak incident. There have been other insect fossils found in Canada and the United States whose only modern relatives live in Australia. These insects include a type of wasp, a family of termites, and bulldog ants. According to the report from Science Daily, scientists are stumped. They don't understand how these insects got from point A to point B. New fish in the Coral Sea. Last on the list are some new fish discoveries that happened during the COVID-19 pandemic. Scientists working remotely with the Schmidt Ocean Institute to study one of the world's largest continental margin plateaus underwater have discovered at least 10 new species of fish, snails, and sponges. This is not any revolutionary discovery, but it is always pretty cool when scientists find new hordes of animals. The research team's vessel spent 46 days in the Coral Sea and captured real-time 4K video of this new underwater life using a special robot. There are a full 74 hours of high-resolution video available to the public right now. Along with lots of new fish, the team managed to map a huge portion of the sea floor, finding at least 30 large coral atolls, many submarine canyons, some dune fields, submerged reefs, and even evidence of underwater landslides. Which recent discovery do you think is the most important? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. From superhuman strength to an incredible new technology that can give anyone superhuman vision, including X-ray vision, here are 10 superpowers you can get right now. Super strength. There are a lot of great superpowers out there right now that you can get, but it's going to cost some money. One of the best and most expensive powers available is super strength, but it does not come in a pill or from gamma radiation. It comes using an exoskeleton bodysuit, and one of the most powerful suits available right now is from a company named Sacros Robotics. They have been developing powered exoskeletons for decades, but now they are really coming to life. Currently available is the Sacros Guardian XO. It's a full-body robotic exoskeleton that allows a human to lift 200 pounds, 90 kilograms. Only it doesn't feel like 200 pounds, it only feels like 10 pounds, 4 kilograms. As of right now, the suit uses a battery pack that allows for 2 hours of operation. It only takes minutes to learn how to use the system. However, the suit costs $100,000 to rent for a single year, and it's not exactly the most fashionable suit. It's actually enormous, and it's definitely not designed to allow you to smash through brick walls like the Incredible Hulk. Still, the future looks good for cyborg humans with super strength. Invisibility. Having an invisibility cloak like in Harry Potter is everyone's dream. Imagine being able to drape a cloak around yourself and turn invisible. This is exactly what a Canadian camouflage company is trying to do. They are called Hyperstealth Biotechnology, and they have a patented material which works to bend light and make people and objects basically invisible to the naked eye. The material is called Quantum Stealth, and it is currently in the prototype stage. However, the company has showed off what it can do, and it is pretty impressive so far. It basically makes objects near invisible, but it can also conceal things from infrared scanners and ultraviolet imagers. It works in any environment, in any season, and at any time of the day. The only issue with this invisibility technology is that it's pretty obvious. Sure, whatever is behind the material is essentially invisible, but you can still see the material. It's also not much like a cloak at all. It's a corrugated sheet made from a special convex outward curving lens. This means that you can't really wrap it around yourself and everyone can see the actual sheet that you're standing behind. Still, just like with the exoskeleton, it's a great first step to a future where people can be invisible. Flying. If you've ever wanted to know what it's like to fly or to be Iron Man, you now have the chance. According to Guinness World Records, human flight is now possible. British inventor Richard Browning has reached record-breaking speeds using his Iron Man suit, which is a body-controlled jet engine-powered setup. He was able to fly at 85 miles per hour across the water using his incredible invention. Richard Browning is actually the founder of Gravity Industries, and he's hoping that with more research and testing, his Iron Man suit can become more affordable and more powerful. What's really cool about this suit is that you control it with your body movement. You need to have a strong core so that you can balance yourself, then you pretty much just fly around like you would expect. Of course, this is a far stretch from flying to work in the morning, but like everything else on the list, it's an amazing first step. And this is something that if you have enough money, you could probably try out for yourself. Have you ever used a jetpack or similar invention that makes you fly? What about hang gliding or parasailing? How did it go? Let me know about your trip in the comments below. Also, remember to subscribe if you have not already, because you'll want to stay up to date with the latest videos, and the best way to do that is to hit the subscribe button now. X-ray vision. X-ray vision would be fantastic. Imagine being able to look through your neighbor's wall and see what they're doing. Sure, it's a little creepy, but you can't tell me you wouldn't at least try it out. In any case, X-ray vision is on its way in, only it's not in the way you might have guessed. It's all happening thanks to the car company Mini Cooper. They have come up with a way to splice X-ray vision with augmented reality. It's kinda like the Google Glass experiment that didn't quite pan out when nobody wanted to put the ridiculous glasses on their face. But this is a little different. The whole idea is that you place a pair of goggles on your face while driving, and then the onboard sensors and cameras on your vehicle give you X-ray vision to look through your car and see what's going on around you. Using this technology, you can say goodbye to blind spots. You can literally just turn your head to the right and see through your car door at what's beside you because of the sensors on the vehicle. You can also use the headset to park better. Imagine looking behind you and literally seeing out of your car. It's a far cry from spying on your neighbor, but it's still a pretty cool power to have. And hopefully this kind of technology will save lives in the future. The only issue is that nobody is going to wear these funny looking glasses, just like with Google Glass. Breathing underwater. Aquaman gets a lot of flack from the other superheroes for having a pretty lame power. All he can do is swim underwater and talk to fish. But in reality, the ability to breathe underwater would be incredible. Humans have proved to be pretty adept at learning how to get beneath the waves, but we still have a lot of limitations. We can scuba dive, but we can't conquer the bends. That means we can't dive too deep, otherwise we will basically die from gases forming in our bloodstreams. More people have walked on the moon than have dived beneath 780 feet, 237 meters. But all that could be changing thanks to an incredible invention. According to a report from The Independent, an American heart and lung surgeon has recently patented a scuba suit that will allow a human person to breathe liquid air. It's a special solution enriched with oxygen molecules. The whole idea is that the scuba suit will allow the diver to inhale a type of liquid very high in oxygen. This liquid can dissolve huge quantities of gas in a person's system. The liquid would be contained inside of an enclosed helmet that would basically replace the air in your lungs, nose, and in your ear cavities. It would be like in a cartoon where the sea creature goes on land wearing a fishbowl on their head. It's the same type of idea. What happens is that the CO2 that's supposed to exit your body when you breathe out would be erased from your blood with a mechanical gill attached to a vein in your leg. This would allow divers to go as deep as they wanted without having to worry about decompression sickness, also known as the bends. This is because the bends happens when nitrogen dissolves in your blood while under intense pressure. By using all this fancy oxygen, you could breathe underwater and go as far into the depths as you want, just like Aquaman. Mind control. Mind control is something everyone wants. Imagine being able to move objects with your mind. We are a lot closer than you think, but it's not happening in the real world, it's happening in virtual reality. This seems like science fiction, but it's actually not. The technology is rapidly heading towards the mainstream thanks to a huge interest in VR technology. It's all about using EEG or electroencephalography. Here's how it works. The player of the video game attaches a headband with electrodes that register brain activity. This allows the player to control the game using their thoughts. By simply concentrating on a certain aspect, you can control it. For example, if you relax your brain and focus very hard on an object to move it, it will move in the video game. This type of neurotechnology is very similar to how bionic prosthetics work. The EEG device can measure the voltage fluctuations that happen when your neurons fire inside of your brain, and they use this to control things. It's already possible to control your avatar in World of Warcraft using an EEG interface, and who knows what will be next. Climbing walls. You probably will not turn into Spider-Man anytime soon, but using a special invention developed by DARPA, you can actually scale walls just like the famous web slinger. It's a research project from the United States, and according to NBC News, it replicates how a gecko climbs up vertical surfaces. They have developed a material that lets anyone who weighs up to 218 pounds, 100 kilograms, climb straight up a glass wall. This is known as the Z-Man program, and it's meant as an alternative for how soldiers scale walls and buildings. I mean, you can always throw a rope over the building and climb up the wall, but why do that when you can be a gecko? As of right now, the technology is a little bulky and ineffective. It works, but it wouldn't work in a real-life scenario. They still need to make the material stronger to carry more weight, and they really need to put it inside of gloves or on boots, something that would allow a person to climb directly up just like Spider-Man. Night vision. Night vision is a cool superpower, but it's far from the coolest. Imagine if you lived in a world of superheroes and your only ability was to see really well at night. You would be super embarrassed, but as a human, having night vision can be very useful. Whether you are spying on your neighbor yet again, or if you're a soldier on a covert mission, being able to see in the dark without using night vision goggles would be very helpful. However, this is not a technology widely available right now. It got a lot of buzz in 2015 when a pair of biohackers said that using eye drops with a chlorophyll analog could induce temporary night vision. They then uploaded photos of themselves with big black eyes after using the eye drops on themselves. The couple had been researching vitamin A2 as a way to extend human vision into the infrared when they decided to try and give themselves night vision. Even though these biohackers claimed that one of them had improved night vision after the eye drops were administered, there is no actual evidence of this. As of right now, this was a one-time experiment that didn't prove anything. But who knows, maybe in the future more study will go into the possibility of night vision eye drops. Echolocation. Believe it or not, scientists are helping blind people to see using echolocation and their ears. This is a pretty complex technology, but they're basically turning blind people into Daredevil. Because yes, just like bats and dolphins, humans can use sonar. Some blind people are even able to click their tongues to see their surroundings. They can hear the clicks from their tongue bouncing off nearby objects, thereby allowing them to navigate through the world. According to Vox, scientists are now trying to push this natural ability to its limits. With the help of a group from Polytechnic University of Valencia in Spain, researchers have developed a helmet that takes images of the world in real time, combines the information with a laser rangefinder, and then gives the information to a blind person in audio cues through a set of headphones. It's essentially a helmet that allows a blind person to have sonar hearing using augmented technology. The only issue is that the helmet looks totally ridiculous, but still, if you're blind and want to experience what it's like to be Daredevil, you can definitely pick up one of these helmets. But don't expect to start doing backflips and fighting crime, as there is no helmet in the world that can give you that type of superpower. Superhuman vision. I already talked about Google Glass a little bit earlier, but let's dedicate a bit of time to the possible superpowers you could get if Google Glass actually did what it should. Sure, you can take first-person videos incognito, you can take pictures, and you can see who's calling you, but this is really just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what a technology like Google Glass can accomplish. Forget putting droplets in your eyes to have night vision. With the proper processor and the proper technology, something like Google Glass could give you night vision. It's as simple as that. You could see in the dark, and it would even allow you to see in infrared. You could get X-ray vision by using the glasses to remove objects from the frame. You could watch life in slow motion, and you could zoom in on things with the vision of an eagle. Theoretically, you could also walk around in a virtual reality of your own. Remember Pokemon Go? Imagine if there were glasses you could wear that turned the whole world into an extremely realistic version of that game, not just something goofy and fun on your phone. The truth is that superhuman vision and full augmented reality will be possible at some time using nothing but a pair of glasses. Unfortunately, all you can do now is take pictures. Which of these superpowers will you rush out to get right now? Let me know in the comments section. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and see you again soon for another fun video.